Welcome back, everybody, and today we are going to be experimenting with paint washes. As hopefully you already know, I like to use paint washes and paint stains to add shade or color to a miniature, but I had the idea recently, can we paint a miniature only using washes? And no, I'm not talking about just putting on a base coat and slapping on one wash or one contrast paint and calling it a day. Now we are going to be adding all our highlights, several layers of highlights, a little bit of shade, a little bit of color, all of it through washes. Let's give it a try. Since we are not going to be highlighting this miniature in the normal way, we need to start with a base coat that is very light in color, basically our highest highlight, and then work our way down from there. So I am doing a base coat, a mix of model color beige red and basic skin tone, basically what would normally be my highest highlight in a standard layering painting method. Our first wash is Panzer Aces New Wood, and this is an overall wash going over the entire miniature, and this is going to add a little bit of color to the skin. I'm mainly adding this because this is supposed to be a barbarian, so you want a nice suntan bronze skin look, and this is going to give us a bit of an orange color to the skin. The standard rules for washes applies here. Paint is fairly thin. In this case, I do want it to tint our base coat, add that orange tone. However, I still want it to collect a little bit into the recesses, so you should be able to see a difference. A little bit of color on the base coat regions, a little bit more of that color in the recesses. Our second overall wash is going to be model color red leather, and this is going over the entire surface area just like the previous coat. This is going to add some red to our skin, which is necessary. And the trick here is that this coat needs to be thinner than the previous coat because we don't just want to cover up the new wood. We want this one thinner so it's more likely to pool in the recesses and not cover the initial base coat as much as our new wood coat did. Next, getting a little bit more red and a little bit more dark, model color burnt red, we are also moving into more of a slightly precision applied spot washes. I'm not being as careful as I would if I was layering. This is kind of still slapping paint on wherever I think it's needed, but we are working more into the recessed area or in adding paint to the undersides of muscles to give us the definition that we need. One thing to note, our burnt red is a very intense red color. However, because we have it thinned so much, maybe about 1 to 6 paint to water, it loses a lot of its intensity and strength. So sometimes you'll have to use a stronger color than you think you actually need when applying your washes. We still need more shade in the recesses. For that, moving over to Game Color Charred Brown, and again going for the deeper recesses, not completely covering up the burnt red that we did, working it a little bit into those areas where needed. The trick here, as we start working into really dark colors, you gotta have them thin. Thinner than you may actually think you need. It's better if you thin it too much and have to apply a second or third coat rather than going too thick, because remember, we are layering on dark colors here, not light colors, so they can kind of sneak up on you, and once they dry, your brush strokes can be very, very obvious, so thinner is better. I want to keep some color in the recesses, so switching over to model color violet red now. Our recesses are getting darker, but we want them have a little bit of color as well. And not only working this into the recesses, I'm working it up to the base coat here and there, redefining the muscles, just adding a little bit of color wherever I think it's necessary. As you can tell right now, this is a very freestyle way of painting because we are painting with very thin washes, essentially very thin layers. There's a lot of freedom here. The paint's so transparent, you can kind of just put it wherever and then slowly build up wherever you think it's needed. Our final shade color is a mix of dark Prussian blue and black, and this is for the deeper recesses, the dark line, wherever I think we need just a little bit more shade. Now, one question some of you may have by this point is that, well, isn't this now layering or isn't this glazing, because we're doing more precise application of paint and it's not the same as a big old sloppy wash like we did in the beginning? And that's a valid point. And I don't have a perfect answer for that question. That's the wonderful thing about the layering technique that I employ. It's very similar to precision wash application. It's very similar to glazing. It just kind of matters how thin you have the paint, where you're applying the paint, the reason you're applying the paint. But all those three techniques are very well tied together. Once you learn layering, it can easily segue into learning glazing or wash application. So that's why I find it much more useful than like wet blending, where if you learn wet blending, you know wet blending, but layering, you can learn a lot more. Our final shade color is going to be just straight model color dark Prussian blue, because I wanted to add just a hint of bit more blue to the shade areas, also give them a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. As you can see, we've been using a wide variety of colors on this model, and we do that because we are using the colors directly onto the model and not mixing them with the base coat, and that gives us a little bit more freedom about what colors we can use and how intense we want them applied. Last thing to use is a glaze on our highlights. Remember, a glaze is basically kind of like a very, very thin wash. You can see how thin our gory red is on our palette. This is a step that I pretty much always use when painting skin. However, in this case, I'm going a bit more extreme with it. We have so much color in the recesses on this model, I decided the highlights needed some more intense color as well. So going very heavy with the gory red here, giving a nice warm skin tone to the highlight areas on the model, also a little bit in the recesses, just putting it wherever I feel like putting it. Again, great benefit of glazing and using these very thin washes. You can put it wherever you feel like you need it. And there we have it, one well-washed barbarian. As I said, this is just an experiment, not a full tutorial. I just wanted to play around with some colors and see if this could be done, and I kind of like it. It has kind of an odd look to it, but it kind of looks like a watercolor painting or kind of a smudge oil painting look. I think it works. Now, on the pro side of this technique, first of all, it allows you to add a lot of color to your models without having to mix a whole bunch of different paints. Also, it's fairly quick. We could have done the similar thing by layering through our shades, our base coat, and our highlights, and doing this all with glazes, and it didn't have to do that this time. We just started with the base coat and put wash after wash after wash on it, and apart from dry time, it did go pretty fast. Now, the main downside of this technique is if you mess up, if you put a brush stroke someplace where you don't want it, you're kind of screwed, because there's no clean base coat that you can go back to and reapply and try to touch up a model. Or if you're painting a different part of the model and get some paint on the skin in this case, ooh, that's bad. However, you can add some glaze medium to your paints, which will slow down the dry time, give you a little bit more play time to make sure you have everything where you want it before it dries and it's stuck. But anyway, I like it. I'm going to play around with this technique a little bit more. Hope you liked it too. If you did, don't forget that like or comment below, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Corman, the barbarian.
Corman, the employer.